It's not the first time voters in the district have been asked this question. Should tipped workers be paid the same minimum wage as all other workers? Voters said yes in 2018, but the will of the voters was overturned by the D.C. Council. Now that question is on the ballot again. If enough voters say yes to Initiative 82, it would gradually raise the minimum wage for tipped workers in places like beauty salons, parking lots, and restaurants from the current $5.35 an hour to more than $16 an hour by 2027. Ryan O'Leary, a former restaurant worker, has been leading the effort to pass the proposal.
You see the first increase next year. It's scheduled to be $3 the first year, $2 every year after that. I don't think people should be worried about price increases. It'll be so marginal and so small that they won't see any real difference.
In a statement, the Restaurant Association of Washington warns against increasing the minimum wage for tipped workers.
A few years later.
Popular D.C. restaurant closing its doors, blaming the controversial Initiative 82. Fox 5's Homa Bash live in Northeast D.C. with details tonight. Hi, Homa.
Hey, Angie. Yeah, we're in front of Sticky Rice here. It has been a staple on 8th Street for 17 years. They'll have their last day this Saturday. They said there were a lot of factors that came into play to come to their decision to shut down, but Initiative 82 played a very big role.
We can talk about cost of eggs, inflation, foot traffic, workforce, the shortage of workforce. We can talk about rent. We can talk to landlords. The common denominator across the board is Initiative 82. It's the increase in labor over the next couple years.
So after passing overwhelmingly by voters in 2022, Initiative 82 increased the tipped minimum wage for workers from $5.35 an hour to now $10 an hour. On July 1st, it'll go up to $12 an hour and keep stepping up until 2027, when restaurant workers in D.C. will be making $17.50 an hour.
Boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. So once again, we got to talk about the consequences of liberal economic policies, especially on these liberal cities that have become training grounds for socialism, right? So they try their socialist experiments just to figure out that, hey, this stuff doesn't actually really work, or put it this way, there are unintended consequences, okay, to the stuff that they're trying, and then they have to backtrack, right? They have to turn around and then try to walk away from things that they advocated for due to the fact that the experiment didn't work out the way that they thought, okay? In this case, we have to go out to Washington, D.C., okay, a city that we talked about recently, and their minimum wage hike for tipped workers, okay, which started back in November of 2022 after the district voted with 74% of the vote to pass Initiative 82, which would effectively raise the minimum wage of tipped workers all the way to $16.10 per hour by 2027. Okay, so it would go from $5.05 an hour, which is what it was before this passed, and then over time, over about 4 or 5 years or so, it would get all the way up to $16.10 an hour. In June of 2025, it was scheduled to move to $12 an hour, and then in 2026, it's scheduled to move to $14 an hour. However, the Democrats on the D.C. Council, they are backtracking on this minimum wage increase because you're seeing a lot of businesses start to shut down over this minimum wage hike. And now the voters are feeling betrayed because of the fact that Democrats are finding out that there are consequences to their leftist economic policy. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this clip.
Details now after chaotic moments at a D.C. council meeting back on Monday. That is when council members passed an amendment partially repealing Initiative 82. That's the law that raises the tipped minimum wage for restaurant workers. Now tonight, 7 News' Carl Willis is learning a group against the amendment is planning one serious challenge.
Emotions on display Monday as the D.C. Council voted to hold off on raising tipped workers' earnings to D.C.'s minimum wage by 2027.
We think this marks a really important first step in finding, long-lasting relief for these restaurants.
But some of those workers and veterans of the industry see it much differently.
Fury, straight fury. Workers in D.C. feel betrayed.
Initiative 82, as it was approved by D.C. voters in 2022, was on track to increase wages before tips from the current $10 an hour to $17.95. But local restaurant operators say they are struggling with operating costs, with more than 50 restaurants like this one closing this year alone.
The fact that this has been voted on twice by such a large percentage of the electorate, and the DC City Council keeps coming back to repeal or pause, is not okay. It's democratic.
Now organizers with One Fair Wage say they plan to file a referendum by Monday because as it stands, the wage increases would be capped at 75% of the minimum wage, with gradual increases over the next 10 years.
Well, we certainly commend the city council members.
Opponents of the initiative claimed lower-earning workers were being hurt the most, with the cost to you, the customer, going up as well.
They're not making that up in sales or revenue necessarily. So we were seeing price increases. In some cases, restaurants were opting to do service fees.
Now that we have this vote in place, do you think we'll see a reversal and some of those extra costs passed on to customers?
We certainly feel like there's a much better opportunity now that those service fees could go away. This is sort of a first step for relief. This is not a fix-all.
We are not going to stop. And if we have to, we will do another ballot initiative.
Carl Willis, 7 News.
Yeah, so you seen that, you heard that. Now, again, why are the Democrats pulling back on this? Why are they saying, you know what, we should probably stop this minimum wage hike from increasing so fast in such a short amount of time? Well, it's because there are massive job declines due to this minimum wage increase. As you have these jobs that were supposed to get the minimum wage increase, their actual wage now is zero, okay? Because when you lose your job due to a minimum wage increase, your minimum wage is now zero, okay? And that is what is happening to a lot of people in these restaurant jobs across D.C., and they're all blaming it, again, on the minimum wage hike.
In D.C. now, a troubling trend is hitting the city's dining scene. Nearly 900 restaurant jobs have disappeared just in the past few months. With D.C. Restaurant Week almost here, 7 News reporter John Gonzalez is live, digging into what's behind these closures and the push to reverse course. John, good morning.
Melanie, good morning. From popular brunch spots on Capitol Hill to longtime bistros here in Georgetown, D.C. restaurants are closing at a rate of nearly 2 per week, and even iconic places like J. Paul's, which was once thriving here in Georgetown, now turning into a clothing store. A new report by the Restaurant Association of Metropolitan Washington shows full-service restaurant employment sharply fell between March and June, marking the largest drop in years. Now, much of the blame, they say, lies with Initiative 82. Under the law, base pay for tipped workers is rising year by year, making labor costs tougher to manage. The D.C. Council has already stepped in, freezing the tipped wage at $10 an hour until 2026 and stretching out the timeline for full parity until 2034. Mike Jones says it's not enough.
We're getting a lot of people who have been in this business for a long time and have made very good living working at whatever was $5 an hour, $8 an hour. But they weren't concerned about that minimum wage because their talent was in how they performed a service at the bar or at the dining room table. That gratuity was for entertainment. That gratuity was for doing a good job. Those people who were making great money are now not making good money, and they're leaving. And restaurants are suffering from that.
Now, One Fair Wage, an advocacy group behind Initiative 82, points to employment data showing record high restaurant jobs in D.C. as recently as April. They cite a New Yorker investigation alleging that the restaurant industry funds front groups and spreads misleading research to block wage laws across the country. More on that argument coming up in the next half hour. Reporting live.
Yeah, so the woke activists are basically arguing that, well, these restaurants closing, people losing their jobs, the industry, what they're saying, it's all fake news, right? It's all made up. It's not real. It doesn't exist. Okay, cover your eyes, right? You're not seeing what you think you're seeing. You're not seeing these restaurants actually close down. No. A utopia is being created, right, of high wages for all of these workers. Okay, they get super high wages, $30, $40, $50 an hour. Who cares? Okay, prices don't increase. You just have a creation of all these new businesses because of all this money flowing. It's amazing. It's great. That is what these liberals believe when it comes to this type of stuff. However, that's not the reality. What happens when you raise minimum wage artificially you have price increases as a result, and or you have job losses, hours cut. That's what happens is businesses close, okay, as a result. Again, there are trade-offs when it comes to this stuff, okay? And we're seeing similar results in other parts of the country like California. We've talked about California quite a bit. They have seen similar results when it comes to what happens when you raise the minimum wage quickly, like these cities are doing, like DC did. Take a look.
Welcome back. California getting yet another hard lesson in economics. The state implemented a $20 minimum wage for fast food workers in April. That was April of 2024. A little over 1 year later, it's estimated that the state has hemorrhaged, get this, 18,000 jobs. The complete opposite of the employment trends across the rest of the country. And I said this before COVID when they were advocating for $15 minimum wage, and then during COVID when wages did go up because we saw such massive inflation, that if the price of your Big Mac meal, and that's what an average person can buy for lunch, is $15, but they're making $15 an hour, then you sort of defeat the purpose of the higher wage. California took it to the next level, to the point where businesses then couldn't be competitive and they had to lay people off. Lou.
Yeah, I mean, you said it in your intro, a hard lesson in economics. We knew what was going to happen, and yet they willfully went forward. This is a math problem. It's a math equation that can be easily solved before you put into place a really bad policy. Beyond having to lay people off, businesses leave and flee states that require higher minimum wages. We need to, remember, it's a minimum wage. It's not supposed to be a living wage, and I think those are the distinctions. We need to provide a pathway, training, opportunities to get people from those jobs into the next level where it is higher wages, not force the bottom up and force businesses to bear the brunt of it because they can't.
Yeah, and yesterday we talked about In-N-Out Burger not wanting to stay in California or its headquarters.
And, you know, you've seen so much business move to the south, to Texas. You've seen Florida take off, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia. All of these states have lower costs of labor, and they're very popular with employers, and there's a good reason for it. I just see this trend continuing and not going away.
Well, the minimum wage crowd has this weird habit of always wanting to use like the stick of the minimum wage to bring people's pay up. And they always seem to be the least cognizant people that there are other ways to get that work done if you back a business into a corner. It's like we talk about AI every day. We talk about technology every day. They refuse to accept that if you price out businesses from their workers, businesses will hire technology. Mm-hmm. That's what happens. Like some of these, there may be some restaurant closures in California, but actually what they're doing is we see this everywhere. It's kiosks. So like what you've done with you can raise a minimum wage and put people out of work, or you can support pro-growth policies and give businesses an incentive that's sustainable to hire new workers and train them up. But the left loves coercion more than they love the outcome they're seeking, which is a better life for workers.
And let me tell you something.
Yeah, so you seen that, you heard that. That is a result of liberal policy. That's what it is, okay? What happens is that you have businesses shut down as a result of the minimum wage increasing, okay? You have jobs being lost. You have less hours being worked. You're not getting the outcome that liberals claim that they're seeking, okay? What you're doing is that you're destroying jobs, okay? We've covered these stories. We saw what happened out in California. The hotel industry out in California, they're struggling now because of this, because of the whole minimum wage thing. Again, we've seen what happens when they raise the minimum wage over and over and over again, and it's the same result over and over and over again, but yet liberals, Democrats, they continue to think that this is a good idea, right? In the case of these tipped workers, they're now making it impossible for these restaurants to be able to operate because of the fact that you have to pay these waiters, these waitresses, you have to pay them like a regular minimum wage, right? They get a regular minimum wage, and that's just not how restaurants are designed to operate, right? Especially some of these sit-down restaurants. Now, some of them can, but when they do operate like that, when they tend to pay their employees a minimum wage or whatever, or higher than minimum wage, where they don't rely on tip, well, you're going to pay more for the food as a result, right? That's just kind of what happens. That is the trade-off, okay? That's the trade-off. But what you're seeing more than anything is that you're seeing these restaurants say, hey, you know what? We got to close up, right? We got to close down. And eventually what you're really going to see are robots that are going to be replacing a lot of these workers. You're going to have robots be waitresses, waiters. I know that, some people may think that's far-fetched, that's too out there. I don't think so, man. I don't think it's that far off. I really don't. I don't think we're that far off from having robots fill a lot of these jobs. And I think these policies from the Democrats, what these policies are doing is that it's just accelerating that. It's accelerating the trend of automation and AI and robotics, because ultimately these businesses, they probably would much rather have a machine do this type of work that, you don't have to pay a quote unquote living wage, rather than to have a human do the work. And then have these Democrats, these politicians demand that the human get paid a wage that is not set by the market, that's being artificially set by the government. Again, a lot of business owners probably would rather deal with automation and robots than to deal with that. And that's just the reality that we're living in right now. That's the reality that we're living in. So, hey, another one of these minimum wage experiments resulting in significant job loss. But let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.